Mom, I'm getting married. My mom looked surprised for a moment before smiling at me when I said this. Then she gently hugged me. That's great. I'm so happy for you. She looked me in the eyes once more, her face swollen with tears. I have to tell your father about this. She then went to the place where my dad's picture was displayed. She sat down in front of it, and I sat diagonally behind her. Darling, Sophia's getting married. With that, she stared at the picture. I also informed my dad about my marriage. Perhaps it was just my imagination, but the smile on my father's face in the photograph appeared softer than usual. By the way, Sophia, how old are you now? Mom turned around and asked me. Come on, I'm 25 years old. I see. It's already been 10 years since then. My dad died of sickness when I was in 9th grade. Since then, my mom and I have been living together. Sophia, thank you for being my daughter up to this point. I'll keep looking forward to spending time with you. My mom suddenly said that. Well, I'll have to prepare dinner. And then she hurriedly went to the kitchen. I had something important to say to my mom that day, but she beat me to it. I completely missed out because she said exactly what I was thinking. My dad brought a new mother into our family when I was in 2nd grade of elementary school. I don't remember my real mother. Before the new mother came, the mom I knew was a lovely lady in the picture, smiling as she held me in her arms when I was a baby. About a year after this picture was taken, she became a star. When I was just a little girl, my dad quietly told me. So when my dad introduced me to my new mom one day, I was so excited and nervous that I hid behind my dad and fidgeted. Then she bent down in front of me, smiled, and said, Sophia, nice to meet you. My new mom took very good care of me. She was always kind and sometimes strict. She always made snacks for me in the evenings, so I wouldn't be lonely because I was her family's only child. I loved her pancakes and cookies. I was very happy to see my favorite family member when I returned home, because I was a latchkey child until the 1st grade of elementary school. Every day after class, I wanted to go home as soon as possible. I would walk home with friends who were going in the same direction. But once we parted ways, I would dash the rest of the way home. My mom was good at cooking and sewing, and on sports days and field trips, I was secretly pleased that my close friends envied me. This person who was always by my side was the only mom I had. I was always by her side as if to compensate for the time I had missed receiving attention from my mom. You two are always so close, my dad would sometimes say to me on purpose as if he was jealous. That's because I love my mom. Whenever I said that, my mom would smile kindly at me. But when I was in the upper grades of elementary school, I became vaguely familiar with the legal parent-child relationship. At first, I only assumed that this was similar to my situation. Then I started to wonder what my mom thought of me. I started to worry about what would happen to me if I had a younger brother or sister. She did not become distant, but I no longer stayed by my mom's side all the time, begging for her attention as I used to. My mom came to school on the day of class observation in elementary school. Then, one of my close friends said something that made me very uncomfortable. You don't look much like your mom, do you? I knew my friend didn't mean to offend me in any way, but I was so shocked. I realized that no one recognized me as my mom's child. I felt depressed thinking about that. On the day of class observation, we were in math class, which I excelled at, but I never once raised my hand. You didn't appear to be in a good mood today. Is something going on? When I got home that day, my mom approached me with a worried expression and served me sweets as usual. No, it's nothing, that was all I could manage to answer. After that, I wanted more than ever to know what my mom thought of me. I thought about asking her several times, but I couldn't, because I was afraid that mentioning it would ruin our relationship. About 3 years later, my cell phone rang one evening. I was studying for the middle school entrance exam, and my parents had finally bought me a cell phone for emergency contact when I reached 9th grade. I couldn't use it during class because it was against the rules. We were, however, allowed to use cell phones on our way to and from school. I checked my phone's display and discovered that my mom was calling. I assumed she had timed her call to coincide with the end of class. Hello? On the phone, she sounded terrified. We've got a problem, Zovia. Your dad collapsed. His office informed me that he was taken to the hospital. I rushed to the hospital as instructed by my mom. I was so panicking that I don't remember what happened after that. Good morning. It was the morning of the day after my dad's funeral. She was cheerful and bright as usual. I was depressed all the time because of the shock of losing my dad so suddenly. She was probably forcing herself to be cheerful because she was worried about me. I couldn't, however, be considerate of her feelings. For a while after that, I had very few conversations with my mom. When she tried to talk to me, I would just respond absently, and the days passed. About a week after my dad's death, I caused an incident. Do your best. My mom called out to me as I was getting ready to leave for school for the first time in a long time. For some reason, this casual phrase irritated me. What? Are you saying I'm not doing my best? I'm doing my best. You have no right to say that to me. I still can't explain why I said such a terrible thing. I wasn't addressing her as my mom. Of course, I didn't mean to harm her. I still vividly recall my mom's sad face at that time. For a while after that, my mom and I did not speak to each other at all. On the day of the parent-teacher conference, to decide which school to attend, we had our first conversation in a long time. If you work a little harder, you will be able to attend a higher-level school than the one you are currently pursuing. Why not give it a shot? My homeroom teacher said to me I had considered attending that high school several times. Despite the fact that it was a public high school, it was about 40 minutes away by bus and train from my house. The cost of commuting to school would be ridiculous, and I was thinking of going to a high school near my house that I could walk to. If you want to go, I'll back you up. I'm not going to tell you to do your best. Go when you want to go. Mom will back you up. I'm not going to tell you to do your best. Go when you want to go. Mom said that over dinner that day. I knew that with my academic ability at the time, I was on the borderline, and there was no guarantee that I would be accepted. If I do not get in, I will have to attend a private school, which will be more expensive than a public school. This would impose a significant financial burden on the family budget. Even as a junior high school student, I thought I understood the difficulty of raising a child on one's own. Given that I could never fail, I reasoned that I should attend a nearby high school. But my mom's expression was serious as she locked her gaze on me. Let me give it my all. I made up my mind. After putting in a lot of effort, I was accepted into the high school of my dreams. I was also able to enroll in a teaching college. After graduating from university, I worked as a teacher at a nearby elementary school. Then I fell in love with the man I met at my second school, and a year later he proposed to me. My mom and I were having dinner as usual the day before the wedding. We're having our last dinner together, so why not have a drink today? I was the one who said that. I said it casually, but she seemed to have planned it from the start. I assumed she had gone to the kitchen, but she returned with something in her arms. This wine was made in the year you were born. With that, she handed me a bottle of wine. I was curious why such a thing was prepared. I heard your father purchased it on the day you were born. She started to explain. Before I married him, your father wanted me to know everything about you. So he told me about what happened after you were born. Of course, he told me about your birth mother. At the same time, he told me about this wine. He said he bought it for the entire family to drink when you get married. I recall him saying it with a smile. So let's drink it today with your father. With that, she brought a picture of my dad. Then my mom and I discussed my father, the two of us, and about the man who would marry me and so on. Then, perhaps a little tipsy, she brought me a small cassette tape. I recognized it as coming from the answering machine we used to have in the house when I was a kid. A date was written on the cassette tape. The date was the day of my dad's funeral. That day I was nervous and concerned about what would happen. So I called home from the funeral home, knowing full well that no one would answer. I thought your dad was listening. I told him everything that was on my mind. I believe this tape is the reason I've been able to work so hard up to this point. Even now, I believe this tape is the link between your father, me, and you. That's why I want you to listen to it too. Mom then stood up and went into the other room to get the old answering machine. Then, a little embarrassed, she pressed the play button. Immediately I heard Mom's voice. However, it was more of a sob than a voice. She started speaking quietly after a few moments of sobbing. Darling, what should I do now? I've no idea what to do. Please tell me. I should have talked to you more about what I should do. Sophia is of course our precious daughter, regardless of what anyone says. I know that, but now that you are gone, I'm not sure I can raise her properly on my own from now on. But I know that if I whine, you will be worried. So I have made up my mind. I will live strongly from tomorrow. But please allow me to whine for a moment, and please watch over us from afar. I couldn't stop the tears from welling up in my eyes from the middle of the recording. My mom's cheerful attitude was an act to keep me from being sad the day after my dad's funeral. I was still too young, even though I was in middle school, to understand how my mom felt. Mom was filled with anxiety and on the verge of collapse at the time, but she kept it hidden. So I won't be concerned. I finally understood. Thank you, Mom. I looked at her as I said this, but she was sleeping peacefully. Mom was her usual self on the wedding day. She went around the room greeting everyone politely, from relatives and acquaintances to my friends. The ceremony went smoothly, and then it was time to read my thank you message to my mom. The spotlights were shining on me. I began quietly reading a letter that contained memories of me, my dad, and my mom. I could hear sobs coming from everywhere in the hall, and I almost started to cry myself. But I held back my tears until the very end. I knew if I blew this opportunity, I'd never be able to tell my mother those words again. My eyes welled up with tears as I finished reading the message. When I looked at my mom beside me, she was holding back her tears and shaking her shoulders. She smiled when she realized I was looking at her. I suddenly remembered her expression when we first met, when she bent down on her knees and smiled at me. And, as I finished reading the thank you letter, I kept repeating to myself the words I had always wanted to say to her. Mom, thank you so much for being my mom up to this point. You will always be my mom. There was a knock on the door and the CEO's wife came in. I've made you some tea if you want some. When I heard that voice, I couldn't hold myself anymore. The CEO's wife appeared surprised, but she did not pursue the matter. Instead, she remained silent and waited for me. I'm a grown man and I feel so bad about this. I'm sorry. I'm really sorry. As I spoke in a strained tone, the CEO's wife said to me, "Could it be that you are..." My name is Jacob Miller. I am 28 years old and live for work. Even though I live for my work, that doesn't mean I'm a great worker and everyone looks up to me, or anything. Of course that would be fantastic, but I know I'm not that capable. I do my best in my own way, but I lack inspiration, empathy, intelligence, and cleverness. To put it mildly, I'm only at a standard level. So when it comes to working hard, I have no choice but to work harder than anyone else. Completing the tasks assigned to me with honesty, regardless of how demanding my schedule may be. That's all I can do. You know, I don't understand how you work so hard and never get sick. That is something that my friends and colleagues who observe my life frequently say. I arrive at work 2 hours earlier than usual in the morning, and complete as much work as possible. I try not to waste time chatting, and instead focus on my work in order to begin a new task in the afternoon. If my boss assigns me a job, I accept it regardless of time. On average, I get home around 10 p.m. And in the worst case scenario, I take the last train home. Even on my days off, I only think about work and do what I can at home. So people around me sometimes worry that I have no life outside the office. But I have never thought of this life as painful. It is a life that I dreamed of so much, and I have finally achieved it. When I was a child, I was very sick, so I could hardly play outside. I was either in the hospital or at home. From the summer of my 3rd year of elementary school until the spring of my 2nd year of middle school. I was envious of others my age who were happily playing outside or participating in club activities. I didn't get sick because I wanted to. I don't even remember doing anything bad enough to be punished by God. I've often grumbled about my life, wondering why I was the only one who deserved to be this way. The friends who cared for me in the beginning gradually stopped visiting me. By the time I entered middle school, I had almost no friends. Of course, it's understandable that people's lives change from elementary to middle school. And their thinking patterns changed as well, becoming busier and busier. But I felt as if I was being left behind. I felt like I was the only one left behind, which made me very sad. However, there was always one person waiting for me next to me. Ethan, my childhood friend since kindergarten. To put it simply, Ethan was a bit clumsy. I guess I inherited my parents' temperament, as I was impatient. So I remember always waiting for Ethan, who was always slow to put on his shoes or run. But now Ethan was waiting for me. Ethan has always had a pleasant and gentle personality. It was not surprising that Ethan remembered me even after the other students around me had stopped visiting me. That is why I was unable to express my gratitude to Ethan or treat him well. But Ethan was my sole emotional supporter. After almost completely recovering from my illness, I was excited to start attending the same school as him in the spring of my second year of middle school. But for some reason I couldn't be honest with him. The day before the opening ceremony of the school, I was so excited to be going to the same school as you, Jacob. Ethan smiled as he spoke to me, but I said something I never expected to say to him. What the hell, weirdo? Just because we've known each other since childhood doesn't mean we're going to be together forever. Ethan smiled at me hearing those words, but he also seemed a little sad. That's how I sensed it. The truth is, at that moment I was just kidding. I was happy too. I wish I could have told him that. I was too embarrassed to say it, and I couldn't. I never imagined that I would regret my insignificant stubbornness more than I could. My first day of school in 5 years, and my first day of middle school would be the following day. Late at night, I was putting on my brand new uniform and getting my shoes ready, with a little bit of anxiety and a lot of excitement. My parents were crying and rejoicing as they watched me. I was a little embarrassed, but even at that moment, I was so happy. Starting tomorrow, I would be a normal middle school student like everyone else. That's what I thought. But then we got the phone call that broke our happy family's heart. My mom dropped the receiver and had a look on her face that I had never seen before. What's going on? When I said that to my mom, she told me something I couldn't believe. Ethan died in a car accident. I couldn't believe it. Ethan was just here in this house with me a few hours ago. We were supposed to be able to attend the same school starting tomorrow. Ethan had been waiting for me for the big day tomorrow. How could you leave me now? It was difficult to accept, but time passed inevitably. The next day I went to middle school for the first time, my mind still in a state of shock. I had friends from elementary school, so it was easy for me to make new friends. But I couldn't smile sincerely because Ethan was no longer with me. I went to Ethan's funeral the next day, but most of my school friends were not there. I had heard that Ethan used to come to see me right after school, so he didn't have many friends. I can't believe he had to give up his normal life to take care of me while I was in the hospital. I know it's something he would do, but what have I ever done for him? To my precious, precious friend, who was always there for me instead of focusing on his own schoolwork. In the end, I couldn't express my gratitude to him. I was the worst kind of friend, calling him weird, even though I didn't mean to hurt his feelings. I'm not sure I deserved to be called his friend. I was so frustrated and sad that I couldn't stop crying during the funeral. I never imagined that this day would come. I thought I would have the chance to thank and apologize to him as much as I wanted from now on. After the funeral, Ethan's parents approached me. I couldn't look them in the eye because I was so ashamed of myself. Ethan's mother handed me a big paper bag. She said, "This appears to be something Ethan purchased to give to you. Would you mind taking it?" I had no idea what it was, but there was no way I could say no. I accepted the paper bag. I couldn't stop crying when I saw what was inside. There was a bright yellow bouquet on the rim with a message card attached. It read, "Jacob, congratulations. You're now out of the hospital. We will always be friends." I realized that Ethan's accident occurred just outside a flower shop in front of the station. The bouquet wasn't damaged, but when I noticed the bag was slightly dented, I understood what had happened. Ethan had gone to buy flowers for me and got into an accident. He had gone to great lengths to think about me. I had never heard of a man giving flowers to another man, but Ethan did it without hesitation. Even at this point, I couldn't express how grateful I was, and all I could do was hold the bouquet in my arms and cry. Ethan would still be alive if an ungrateful person like me had not been his friend. Ethan's parents had every reason to believe that, but they didn't blame me. They said with a smile, "Thank you so much for being Ethan's friend." I had never done anything to deserve their gratitude. I didn't do anything. I'm just an immature guy, and I'm really sorry I couldn't do anything for Ethan. All I could do was apologize to them, and I knew that Ethan was no longer here to hear me. I couldn't accept the fact that Ethan was no longer with me. I never once forgot, but day by day I began to move on with my life, because I knew exactly what I wanted to do when I grew up. Until then, all I wanted was to go to school and live a normal life. I was only concerned with myself, but for the first time I found myself wanting to do something for someone else. That's what has kept me going until now, at the age of 28. So no matter how busy I am, I have never wanted to run away from my life. However, something has been bothering me so much lately that I am convinced I am going insane. Mr. Williams, my new boss, has been transferred from the main office. I had heard rumors that he was a strict person, but to be honest, it was more than I had imagined. I don't mind the harshness with which he speaks to me and treats me. However, the way he assigns work and treats his employees is incomparable. Furthermore, my attitude that I would do my best, no matter how difficult the work was, irritated him. And now that he was watching over me, I am in even more trouble. I despise people who believe they are accomplishing much by devoting many hours to tasks. I believe they are simply attempting to justify their inefficiency at work. The really good ones get the job done in less time. I used to arrive at work early and work overtime, and he told me that I would not be compensated for any overtime work, but the amount of work he assigned me was too much for me to complete during my working hours. Of course, I admit that I am incompetent, but there is no denying that there is an overload of work, regardless of how anyone looks at it. Are you alright, Jacob? It's rumored that at the headquarters, people who received attention from Mr. Williams quit one after the other. Maybe you should talk to your superiors about it. My colleagues and close senior colleagues talk to me like that, but I cannot be discouraged here. I have to do what I have to do now to be useful to this company. I don't care about myself. Above all, I want to help this company, so thanks, I'm good. I kept answering like that. Then one day, the CEO of the company visits our office, which is not far from the headquarters, on a regular basis to inspect it. Finally, I was summoned by the CEO. Despite the enormous amount of work, I am doing my best. But has my performance declined? Is it possible that my relationship with Mr. Williams has gotten so bad to the point where I will be transferred to another branch office? It was the first time the CEO had summoned me, so I entered the designated conference room with nervousness. Then the CEO said to me, "Jacob, I received a tip that Williams is abusing his authority over you. Is this true? I know it may be hard to talk about it, but I would like to hear the truth." The CEO is famous for his good personality. Despite his position as CEO, he appears to be concerned about his employees. To be honest, I was happy. If I told the truth here, I might be able to break free from my daily routine of being overworked and treated with disrespect. But I wondered if I should take the easy way out. What is the right thing to do for the company? I thought about it, but could not come up with an answer, and I could not open my mouth. Then the CEO said, "Take your time. I'll wait as long as you want." He was probably sensing my emotions. I felt like crying at the moment, even though I was an adult, because those words reminded me of Ethan. A few minutes later, there was a knock on the door and the CEO's wife came in. Although she was the wife of the CEO, she was also a vice CEO. She and her husband are both charismatic and well-liked within the company. They are not your typical CEO or vice CEO in the sense that they always have a friendly and caring heart. I've known that for a long time. Perhaps sensing the situation, when she noticed the prolonged silence between me and the CEO, she said calmly, "I've made you some tea if you'd like some." That kindness moved me to tears yet again. I couldn't stop myself. They would never have guessed I'd start crying. The CEO and his wife both looked surprised, but they didn't pursue the matter and instead sat quietly waiting for me. The more I tried to stop crying, the more I couldn't stop crying. All I could do was grasp the teacup that had been handed to me and say, I feel bad for crying in a place like this. Even though I'm an adult, I apologize. I'm incompetent and incapable of assisting anyone. I truly apologize. As I spoke in a strained tone, the CEO's wife asked me, "Hey, I don't mean to be rude, but what's your first name?" Without knowing why I was asked such a question, I replied, Jacob Miller. When I answered that, the CEO's wife looked surprised. "Are you by any chance Jacob Moore, Ethan's friend?" With that, I went blank, because it was true. Jacob Miller was my name until my senior year of high school. Around that time, my parents divorced and my surname was changed to Miller after my mother. And I knew, of course, that the CEO and his wife were Ethan's parents, just as she had said. Ethan stood by my side, but I couldn't do anything for him. So in order to repay Ethan, I wanted to help Ethan's parents. I've lived my life with the intention of joining Ethan's parents' company and being useful to them since the spring of my second year of middle school. But I couldn't help Ethan, and they'd probably like to forget about me being the cause of an accident. So I had been hiding my true identity this whole time. I didn't expect to be found out at a place like this, so words didn't come out right away. Nevertheless, I would not be able to keep hiding it. "Yes, it's been a while." I wiped away my tears, stood up, and bowed my head. "So you were the child back then. I apologize for not recognizing you." When the CEO said this and bowed, his wife burst into tears, and I knew it. "You said you'd take on all responsibilities in the same way you did back then. I had wanted to meet you for a long time." At the time, I was so sad that Ethan was gone that I couldn't think about anything else. I couldn't express my gratitude to you, who was my son's most important friend. I was surprised at what she said. "No, I'm the one who should be thanking. Ethan always put me first, and was the best support I had when I was in the hospital, but I couldn't be honest with him. I may have made him feel bad, so I was really ashamed of myself and couldn't visit you or visit Ethan's grave. I'm truly sorry. I'm here at this company now, because I wanted to help you both, even if it's from behind the scenes. I know it won't be enough to compensate for what I couldn't do for Ethan, but I felt that this was the only thing I could do." They looked surprised when I told them about my apology, which I had kept hidden in my heart for many years. And now the CEO opened his mouth. "That's not true. You gave a lot to my son, Ethan. Many children were cruel to Ethan because he was feeble-minded and bad at sports since he was a child. However, Ethan always said that you were the only person who cheerfully waited for him with a smile on your face. When Ethan found out you were sick, he looked very sad. He said it was his turn to back you up. You backed me up at this time." That was the first time Ethan, who had never been able to make up his mind to do anything on his own, did so. As his parents, we felt you were such an important friend to him, and we could never thank you enough. I had no idea that Ethan felt that way. I was expecting him to see me as a cold friend. It was something Ethan and I never discussed, and maybe we were both looking for an opportunity to express it to each other. The truth I learned after 15 years. I felt embarrassed, frustrated, and happy. I couldn't understand these feelings myself. Then the CEO's wife started to speak. "Thank you so much for still caring about Ethan. I'm sure Ethan would be pleased if he knew what was going on right now. And even if it wasn't possible, I think Ethan would have understood. Before he left the house to buy flowers, he said you might say you don't want them because you're shy. But he also said you take good care of them so they don't wither. I know how he is." And he smiled when he said that. Hearing those words, the tears that had stopped welling up began to flow again. I knew Ethan was always one step ahead of me. He could even tell when I wasn't being honest with him. Not only did I carefully arrange the flowers he gave me that day, but I also dried them so they will last forever. I'm not a flower person, but I keep them in my room. Ethan, who was 13 years old, was right. The CEO's wife said one more thing to me as I was looking down and crying again. "But from now on, please live your life." I am sure Ethan would want you to do that too. I think what he most wants is for you to live your own life. With those words, I felt as if all of my tension had been released. No matter what they say, I still wanted to repay Ethan and his parents. At the same time, I feel as if I could be more concerned with my own feelings, to value my life, which Ethan had helped me with. I reasoned that by doing so, I might be able to make Ethan happy. Then I began to confess about Mr. Williams' abuse of authority, about myself, and about other employees. I told him everything I knew. As a result, Mr. Williams was returned to the corporate headquarters and demoted to a regular employee in order to change his attitude. I can now work with more motivation within a reasonable time frame. Surprisingly, I am able to work more efficiently and effectively, and I have become more valuable to the company. For a long time, I was indebted to Ethan and his parents. From now on, I intend to do my best to repay them while also enjoying life to the fullest and not overworking myself. I am currently employed at a small downtown restaurant that has been in operation for a long time and is well known in the community. I started working there as a part-time job while in high school, but after graduation I was officially hired. I was even appointed as the manager of the restaurant now that I am 26 years old. When I was little, my grandma took me here. Since then, I have believed that the hamburgers at this restaurant are the best in the world. I am grateful to have had the opportunity to work at my favorite restaurant for so long. But something happened that I never imagined. I never expected to meet that person while working at this restaurant. My parents divorced when I was young, and my dad raised me until he died of an illness. He had a heart attack. Because my parents died, my grandmother, who was my dad's mother, has raised me since I was a child. By the way, I still live with my grandma. Her back is no longer straight because she is getting older, and my grandfather died, so I am the only one she has left. I only have her as a family member, so I am always with her. I love her, and the fact that she raised me is the reason I can live my life without worries. So I felt like I had to return the favor. One of the reasons I have worked at the same restaurant since high school is that it is close to where my grandma lives. The owner of this restaurant is an old friend of my grandma's. She introduced me to the owner of this restaurant, which led to my current position, so I owe her a great deal. When I became the manager of the restaurant, I told my grandma, "Listen, I'm the manager now." "I'm the manager of the restaurant." She replied, "Oh my, really? I'm so happy for you. Congratulations. It's because you work so hard and diligently. That owner only trusts the store to people he really trusts. You'll make sure to continue to work hard." Well, now that I've heard that, we must celebrate. My grandma was so excited about my promotion that she ordered sushi for dinner that night. My dream is to become an experienced chef and run this restaurant. I can't say it out loud because the owner is still working. But someday I want to serve my grandma the best hamburgers in the world. I still have a lot to learn, and even though I am the manager, the restaurant is still small. So it's not easy because I have to do everything in the kitchen, from serving customers to cleaning, but I hope to make it happen someday. One day, as usual, I was cleaning the counter and chatting with a regular customer. A woman entered the store with a shopping bag slung over her arm. I showed her to the table and offered her a glass of water because the restroom was relatively empty. "Are you on your way home from shopping?" I talked to her. I casually asked her because the owner always tells me I should have casual conversations with customers. Then, "Oh yes, she replied. "Something is not right. She's been coming here a lot lately at this time of day. Come to think of it, she is an odd person who always orders coffee and then leaves without drinking much." She was a rumor among the employees. I believe that in this day and age, everyone's circumstances are different, and I consider every person who visits our store to be a valuable customer. So I made some hot coffee and delivered it to her seat. "Enjoy." I guessed from the lady's previous response that she wasn't a good conversationalist. So I quietly put down the coffee, and as I went back to the counter, she stared at my name tag and asked me about it. "Excuse me, I know this is sudden, but can I ask you your first name? I've been doing this job for a long time, but I've never been asked for my first name before, so I was taken aback." "Excuse me?" I said. The lady remained silent and stared at me. I had no reason to refuse, so, "Jack is my name," I responded. "Oh, I knew it. I'm sorry." With that, the lady started to cry. Being unable to comprehend what was going on, I asked, "Is everything okay? Do you know me?" Then the lady didn't say anything for a while. After a while, she said, "I'm your mother." When I heard those words, my mind went blank, and no words came out. Indeed, now that she had said that, I recognized her as a vague memory of my mom from when I was a child. I got goosebumps when I connected my mom and my memory with the woman in front of me. Because there weren't many customers at that time, I sat across from her and talked for a while. She had apparently been through a lot since her divorce and wanted to come pick me up, but she couldn't. She was now married to a new person and had a daughter. "I'm sorry I couldn't pick you up sooner," she said. She was crying as she spoke, but I had no idea why she had to come here now. This is my mom, whom I had waited for since I was a child. There were times when I couldn't understand why my mom had abandoned me, and now that she has appeared, I felt a mix of sadness, happiness, and conflicting emotions. My dad had told me that my mom was not with me because of adult circumstances, but I was surprised to learn why my parents had separated. My dad had alcohol problems, and when he got drunk, he hurt my mother. They split up because of his domestic violence, which resulted in her getting injured. My dad, who worked full-time at the time, apparently persuaded her that he would take me in. My mom was terrified of him, and she couldn't talk to anyone about it, so she was alone and worried for a long time. She was barely able to obtain a divorce, and she planned to pick me up once her life had settled down. But she didn't even want to see my dad's face, and that's how time passed by. I told her that my dad had passed away. "Oh really? I'm really sorry for all the trouble I put you through," she cried again. She came to eat at this restaurant last month for the first time in over a decade, and she couldn't believe it when she saw my face. She was always eager to speak with me and apologize for what she had done, but she couldn't bring herself to do it because I was serving others. When I saw my mom crying and apologizing over and over, I felt sorry for her. "It's all right. It's all in the past now, Mom. You've been through a lot, haven't you?" I never thought the day would come again when I would say the word mom. I was nervous, but I was able to calm my mother down a little. She asked me if she could bring her husband and daughter to the restaurant soon. I told her if it was at noon, when no customers were present, it would be fine. She then left, saying she would bring her family the following week. Sigh, she'll be here with her husband and daughter. To be honest, I had mixed feelings. I talked to the owner of the restaurant about it, and he said, "You should at least listen to what they have to say." But I didn't know how to introduce myself to my mother's new husband and daughter. My mom arrived the following week at the appointed time with her husband and daughter. The husband was a tall, slender man, and the daughter was much younger than me, around high school age. I was nervous, or put in another way, I had this strange feeling swelling around me the entire time. Anyway, I directed them to the same seat as before, offered them a drink, and sat down. But I didn't know what to say, so I kept quiet. "I'm sorry for suddenly coming like this. I know I startled you, didn't I?" He spoke to me gently. He approached me in a friendly manner, and we talked for a while about random things and various aspects of my past. As we talked, I discovered that we both enjoy manga and video games, and we get along well. His daughter attends the same high school I did, and she appears to be sweet and honest. Surprisingly, I was enjoying our conversation. My mom was smiling happily as she listened. It was a welcoming family, and I was thinking how nice it would be to have such a welcoming family environment. As I was about to return to work, my mom's husband straightened his back, looked at me in the eyes, and said, "Jack, actually, we have a proposal for you today." "A proposal? Why don't you come live with us at our house?" "What?" I asked, surprised. "Your mom has been asking us for advice ever since she found you. Our daughter and I have been hearing about what's been going on for a long time, and I consider it a miracle that we've been able to meet again in such a way. After speaking with you today, I believe my daughter and I would like you to live with us. What do you think?" That's what he said. I was surprised, but honestly, I wanted to be a part of this family. "But I'm sorry, I truly appreciate your feelings." When I said that, my mom said, "You don't have to respond right now. You can think about it all you want, okay?" And then the three of them left. When I returned to work, the owner came out, having overheard our conversation. "Aisha, why did you say no?" He asked me. "Why?" I replied, "Because I have my grandma, The owner held his eyes and burst into tears. I see. I knew you would say that. Then he slapped me on the back strongly. Hey, that hurt. My eyes welled up with tears as well. My mom, her husband, and their daughter returned to the restaurant several times after that. We now all go out to dinner and hang out together on occasion. The daughter has grown very fond of me and is very cute, like a real sister. Sometimes my stepfather says, "Isn't it about time you came to our house?" But I've been firmly refusing his offer. My grandma raised me to this point in my life. I can't tell her I'm going to live apart because my mom has come to pick me up. I will take care of her until the very end, and I'm going to make my dream come true before then. Oh, I'm going to buy my grandma's favorite cake today. There is one thing that's been on my mind. It has been bothering me so much that I am unable to do any work. It is the contents of my wife's cell phone. My wife and I have been married for 3 years and have never cheated on each other. Maybe she's just hiding it, but I don't think so. Of course, I've never had an affair. We met in our first year of college, and I asked her out in our second year. During our freshman year, we all hung out a lot, went out drinking, and so on. She was in that group, and while I spoke with her frequently, I was drawn to various aspects of her. She had lovely eyes, for example, and she paid close attention to me. When I talked to her, no matter how down I was, she would lift my spirits. She would reach out to me no matter how bad I was feeling. I couldn't help but fall in love with her. She appeared to be interested in me as well, and she quickly accepted my proposal. I was overjoyed because I was prepared to be dumped in the worst-case scenario. We dated for 5 years. On her birthday that year, I proposed to her. Here's what I said to her when I proposed. I can no longer live without you. Please marry me. I struggled with what to say until the day before, and this is the phrase I came up with. It may have sounded uncool, but it was the best proposal for me. When she heard what I said, she replied, "I can't live without you either." I'd love to. I still remember how happy I was. Later, I became a little worried and asked her, "How did you feel about my proposal?" I gave it a lot of thought, but I couldn't think of anything else besides what I said. "I'm sure it wasn't cool, was it?" She responded, "Yes, it was a little uncool, but the fact that you genuinely care about me is the coolest thing in the world. And I could tell you couldn't live without me." That made me very happy. That's what she told me. I was relieved, but then I thought to myself, I guess I wasn't that cool after all, and dropped my shoulders. We've strayed a little bit, but 3 years have passed since then. I came home from work one day and said, "I'm home," as usual, but there was no response. I was curious as to what was wrong. What was wrong? I went back into the house and discovered my wife taking a bath. Normally, I would get a response, but because she was in the bath, she didn't, which was fine. So I washed my hands, changed out of my suit, and sat down on the couch. Then I noticed my wife's cell phone, which had been left open, on the table in front of the couch. My wife's cell phone is an old flip phone, and I was wondering why it was left open. I tried not to move the phone, and just looked at it, and saw her screen filled with incoming emails. The screen only displayed the sender and the title, but no sender's name. And they were from an unknown phone number. "I want to meet you right now," or "Today is the day I met you," were the subject lines of those emails. Those messages caught my attention. I was so surprised that I couldn't help but mumble, "What? What exactly is going on?" I tried to get a good look at them, but then my wife spoke to me. "Oh, you're home. Do you want to have supper?" I felt bad about looking at her phone without her permission, and was a little agitated because I couldn't believe my wife had been reading a mysterious email that was most likely sent by a guy. I tried not to show my displeasure by saying, "Yeah, I'm home. I'm gonna eat first. Oh, but first I think I'll go take a bath." "I see. I'll start making dinner then," my wife said to me with a smile. I was alone in the bathtub, lost in thought. Could there have been an error in the contents of my wife's cell phone that I had just witnessed? We've been married for 3 years, and there was no way I could have sent her text messages like that. Is it possible that she's meeting another man? I'm sure my wife wouldn't do such a thing, but I believe it is still too early to draw that conclusion. I don't want to doubt my wife, in whom I have complete faith. So, I decided to trust my wife, telling myself that there had to be a mistake. And I was getting anxious just thinking about it in the bath. So I got out and stopped thinking about it. I enjoyed chatting with her while eating the most delicious dinner she had prepared. I was relieved to see her acting normally, and I got a good night's rest for tomorrow's work. The next day, I'm not good at getting up in the morning. My wife usually wakes me up, but for some reason I was able to get up by myself today. But I believe I understand why I was able to stand. It was probably because my mind was preoccupied with the contents of my wife's cell phone that I saw yesterday. Even though I trust my wife, I'm still concerned about certain issues. Then my wife came to my room. She said, "Good morning." "What? This is unusual. I didn't expect you to wake up on your own. Breakfast is ready, so come down whenever you're ready." With that, she went back to the living room. What am I thinking? I wondered, and finished preparing. I was on the train to work after eating my wife's delicious breakfast as usual. Morning rush hour is always crowded, and I've never been able to find a seat on the train. But I preferred standing today. I was still thinking about the contents of my wife's telephone that I had seen the day before. I sighed without realizing it. When I sighed, I noticed that the people around me were giving me angry looks. They must dislike people sighing on a crowded train in the morning. But I didn't have time to worry about that now. I arrived at the office smoothly and began working as usual. However, I couldn't get the incident out of my head and couldn't concentrate on my work. Then I heard a voice saying to me, "Your hands are not moving. It's unusual to see you loafing on your work." It was my boss. I was taken aback and quickly apologized to him, explaining that I was only thinking and not slacking off. Then my boss said, "That's okay, but if you need anything, I'm here to help you, so let me know." He said in a kind tone, so I thanked him. And so I invited my boss to lunch and told him the story. Then my boss said, "She's obviously cheating on you. There's no doubt about it, in my opinion," he stated confidently. Hearing those words, I was seriously depressed. All I could do was nod my head. My mind went blank and I had no energy to work since the afternoon. However, my supervisor said to me, "Get your act together. It is during these times that you must work harder. It's a lot easier when you direct your rage at work." I guess he wanted to encourage me. His words made me feel a little better. I worked hard enough in the afternoon to make up for lost time in the morning. Surprisingly, when I focused on my work, I had no time to think about the incident. I had no time to think about anything else, but work was over, and it was time to go home. I was now on the rush hour train, thinking about what I was going to do, and recalling what my boss had said to me at lunch today. I decided to act and search for physical evidence, so I returned home and announced my arrival, as usual. However, there was no response. I changed out of my suit and sat on the sofa, just like I had done the day before. And, just like yesterday, there was my wife's cell phone. For some reason, she had left it open again today, as if she wanted me to see it. I noticed my hand reaching for the phone, and saw that the mailbox was open when I looked at the screen. All I could see were a number of random messages I had sent, such as "I'm on my way home now." However, at the bottom of the screen, there was a folder containing emails that I had previously seen. There were probably hundreds of them, all sweet messages from a mystery man to my wife. The moment I saw them, I was filled with anger. When my wife came out of the bathroom, I became so emotional that I questioned her, "What's going on? Are you having an affair with me? Who is this guy who sent you the email?" I said in a slightly louder tone. Then my wife surprised me by bursting out laughing. I had expected her to make a troubled face and cry, and for us to end up in a fight. But instead, she said, "Oh my goodness, this is hilarious. Have you forgotten about the emails you sent me?" I must have looked dumbfounded because I didn't understand what she meant. But when I thought about it calmly, I realized something. The emails were from a long time ago. It was so obvious that I felt embarrassed for not noticing it sooner. I only realized it when my wife pointed it out to me. The sender's phone number was my old cell phone number. Meanwhile, my wife's phone battery was running low because she had been using the same phone for years, and the battery must have worn out. Because the phone was old and nearly broken, it had been left open. If I don't make sure it's tightly closed, it stays on forever. That's what she explained to me. I had gotten home early from work, and my wife was always taking a bath when I arrived. She couldn't even get out of the tub to greet me. I immediately lost all my strength and collapsed on the sofa. "What? Did you think I was cheating on you?" My wife innocently poked me on the cheek. I explained to her. I was taken aback. "Anyway, I believe your phone is too old. Why don't you replace it?" I was going to change the subject, but I don't want those emails to disappear. "But I don't want those emails to disappear," she said that. I was starting to feel bad about snooping on her phone. I apologized and said I was sorry for looking at her phone without her permission, and she laughed. "You're the only one who will love me so much." With that, she hugged me. Then she hugged me a little tighter and said, "I can't live without you. On the contrary, I can live as long as I have you. That's how much you mean to me. So you don't have to worry about anything." I returned the hug and thanked her, telling her that I felt the same way. On my next day off, I got my wife a new cell phone. It was the latest smartphone at that time. My wife was initially hesitant, but I told her she could save her phone messages by transferring them to a memory card. "If that's the case, I'm willing to switch," she replied with a smile. My wife appeared to be struggling with the phone because she was unfamiliar with it. Of course, I paid for the phone with money from my own pocket. This is my way of apologizing for inappropriately looking at her phone. I discovered an old notebook while doing some cleaning. This brings back memories. This was my mother's diary, February 11, 1980, 10:05 a.m. I finally met my sweet baby. My husband and parents were all watching over me and supporting me. This baby, who had been in my womb for a long time, arrived with a happy birth voice. His name is Carter. I wanted him to be cheerful and wise. And he was the first grandchild for both families. We hoped he would be a source of light for both families, as well as a source of warmth and inspiration for others. That's what I had in mind when I named him. I hope he will grow up to be a wonderful boy. This brings back memories. My mother had beautiful handwriting. I had no idea she had that idea when she gave birth to me, and I had no idea she had such high expectations for me. February 11, 1981, Carter's first birthday. Carter is growing up healthy and well, with no serious illness or injuries. He can now crawl, stand up, and crouch onto something. He moves a lot, he opens the wardrobe, and he makes a mess. He can be a little too energetic and bothersome at times, but maybe I love my son too much and think he's adorable. I usually forgive him. I am excited to see what kind of child he will grow up to be, but I am also concerned. I guess I used to annoy my mother a lot when I was little. August 21, 1983. Carter is now 3.5 years old. Some neighborhood kids made fun of him today while he was playing at the park. Kato was not crying when he noticed it, but was attacking and hitting back. He didn't care if the kids were bigger than him. I don't want him to get hurt, and I worry that he will get into trouble. At the same time, I was proud of him, thinking he had grown into a strong young boy. I don't remember that at all, so something like that had happened. August 10, 1984. Kato seems to be getting along well with Jenny these days. I spoke with Jenny's mother today, and it appears that Jenny was bullied by other children. Poor Jenny, but Kato defended her from the bullies and protected her. I'm so happy that he has grown up to be a wonderful boy. When I told my husband, he was overjoyed and lavished compliments on Carter. Jenny's mother and I laughed and joked that when they marry, we will be related. Maybe this could really happen. Jenny's mother said that Jenny's dream is to be Carter's wife. And when I casually asked Carter about it, he said he was going to marry Jenny. I'm looking forward to the wedding. The diary ends here. Yes, my mother died when I was 5 years and 6 months old, during the summer vacation. She went to see her husband's side of the family. My parents left me with my grandparents. I went to the beach for the first time in a long time. At around 10 p.m. my grandma picked up the phone and suddenly started to cry. Grandpa, who took the phone, turned pale. As a child, I remember wondering what was going on. My grandparents and uncles then began hurriedly preparing for something. Those who had been laughing and playing with me earlier became serious. Suddenly we had to go to the hospital together. I had no idea what was going on. I just knew that something terrible had happened. We arrived at the hospital and were shown to a room that was dimly lit. Inside, my grandparents, who had entered the room before me, were in tears. In the middle of the room, my father and mother were lying in bed. My uncle, who came in with me, began crying as well, and I approached my father and mother with anxiety. "Dad! Mom! Hey, wake up!" No matter how many times I yelled, screamed, or shook them, they refused to wake up and remained asleep. I finally realized that my parents were gone. My parents were gone forever, and I cried until I lost my voice. My father had told me that men should not cry. As a child, I had made a promise to myself to be strong and cry as little as possible, but I couldn't stop crying. My uncle felt sorry for me and told me he will watch over you from heaven. He consoled me, but I couldn't understand why I couldn't go to heaven with my parents. I still remember saying that. Looking back, I feel bad about it, but at that time, no one could console me. My parents were driving back from the beach when they came across a large truck on a sharp curve. The speeding truck overturned and collided with them. With my parents suddenly gone, I was sent to live with my father's side of the family and had to stop attending kindergarten. I had to say a sudden goodbye to my friend Jenny as well. Everything in my world changed in an instant, and as a small child, I couldn't accept it. I just wanted to be with my parents in heaven. Every night, I would leave the house, hoping to find a way to heaven. My grandfather would always bring me back and tell me to be strong. After about a month, I started attending a new kindergarten, but my personality had completely changed. I didn't want to talk to anyone or laugh. I couldn't make friends, and all I did was fight with those who bullied me. I was unable to recover from my parents' death and grief, and no one understood how I felt. I began to lash out at anyone who came too close. Gradually, all the people who had tried to console or bully me left. No one paid attention to me, and I was all alone. Even in my grandfather's house, I kept my mind closed, which was exactly what my mother didn't want me to do. It was like that until I was in the 2nd grade of elementary school when my grandfather passed away. I was left to live with my sickly grandmother, who found it difficult to support me financially and physically. Since my mother's parents had already passed away, I was placed in an orphanage. My uncle and I had grown increasingly distant since my parents' death, and I hadn't seen him since. He probably refused to accept me. My grandmother cried and apologized, but I assumed it would be the same no matter where I went, so I did as I was told and went to the orphanage with her. While we were listening to a staff member explain about the orphanage, another staff member brought in a couple I didn't know. For some reason, the 3 of us were the only ones left in the room while my grandmother and I were there. Grandmother and the staff went to another room to talk about something. Then the couple started talking to me about various things. They asked me what I like to eat, what kind of games I like to play, about the park near their house, and so on. As usual, I was worried about them at first. They, on the other hand, were not affected by me, and spoke to me in a cheerful, calm tone of voice. Hearing such a calm voice, I suddenly remembered my parents. When I raised my face from its slumped position, I felt something warm. Words cannot adequately describe it, but I felt a sense of security. The couple had been childless for many years, and had come to the orphanage for advice on becoming foster parents, who would eventually adopt children. They saw me at the time and offered to take me in any way they could. The facility staff's sudden explanation of foster parenting also surprised and troubled the grandmother. She was persuaded, however, by the couple's calm attitude and my reaction after speaking with them. Finally, she gave me 2 options: stay at the orphanage or go with the couple, and she preferred that I go with the couple. Leaving my sick grandmother alone, on the other hand, made me feel uneasy. I moved in with my new parents, and despite the fact that it was my choice, I found it difficult to open up to them. Of course, it had been many years since I had forgotten how to open my mind. Furthermore, I lost my mother and father when I was very young, and I had no idea how to ask for attention since then. And I didn't know how to associate with my parents. I could not change my mind so easily. However, my stepmother was always kind to me and smiled at me warmly. My stepfather, who liked my stepmother, was always kind, but occasionally corrected me. They were not my parents who had died, but they were similar to them in some ways. My heart naturally opened up to my new father and mother. Then I developed an unexplainable high fever one day. My new parents rushed me to the hospital, and I was admitted as an emergency. In my foggy consciousness, I remember thinking that maybe I was going to heaven. But at that time, unlike before, I wanted to live a little longer. When I came to, I found my stepmother sitting by my bed, asleep, holding my hand. What a warm hand, I thought, and I burst into tears and cried uncontrollably. My stepmother noticed, and I had regained consciousness. Thank God. I'm so glad. I was afraid you wouldn't wake up. She was crying with joy. I had been unconscious for 2 days. My stepmother immediately called my stepfather's office, and he rushed in, leaving his work undone. I felt as if I were in a bad dream all this time. When I woke up from my nightmare, I realized that this was the genuine warmth of my father and mother. It was as if deep within me, long-forgotten feelings of joy and nostalgia were gradually reawakening. I was able to call them father and mother openly and honestly after that. Months passed by, and I was in my 3rd year of high school. It was time for me to think about my future. My friends around me were still wondering what to do, but I had already decided on a career. I wanted to become a firefighter. My goal was to join a rescue team and save as many lives as possible. That thought quickly transformed into my passion for life. With this thought as my fuel, I worked hard in high school and college, studying and exercising to achieve my dream. I passed the firefighter employment examination without incident, and my parents were overjoyed. My stepmother said, "You'll have to go and tell your grandma." With that, I went to see my grandmother, whom I had avoided seeing since the 2nd grade of elementary school for unknown reasons. I hadn't seen my grandmother in a long time, and she appeared much smaller than she had previously. But after I was taken in, my uncle took care of her. Her illness did not worsen, and she was doing well. I was relieved. My grandmother wept, surprised to see me all grown up, and then wept again, overjoyed that I had become a firefighter. My grandmother then handed me my mother's diary, which she had planned to give me when I was older. When I read it, I couldn't stop the tears from welling up. I learned how much she adored me, what she was thinking when she gave birth to me, and what kind of child I was. I could feel my late mother's feelings in my father's thoughts. I read the diary every day since then. I recalled Jenny, whom I had erased from my memory due to the sadness of losing my parents, as I read it over and over. I began to wonder what she was doing now. Even after I became self-sufficient, I would occasionally go to my step-parents' house for dinner. And one day I mentioned Jenny to them. Then my stepmother looked at me strangely and asked, "Do you remember Jenny's last name?" I told her Jenny's last name, which was written in the diary. She exclaimed, "What? No way," and hurriedly took out the photo album. I was surprised at the picture my stepmother showed me. In that picture, Jenny was unmistakably there. It was the same person who was in a telephone photo of me at my grandmother's house. I heard that Jenny's mother and my current mother were high school best friends who still visit each other's homes on occasion. What a coincidence! My stepmother called Jenny's mother and made an appointment for the 4 of us to meet. The last time we met was when we were kids. Although I was hesitant, I was also curious about Jenny, so we agreed to meet. Jenny, whom I hadn't seen in a long time, still looked vaguely familiar. I was surprised to see that she had grown up to be a very pretty woman. Jenny's mother told me a lot about my deceased mother and me when I was a kid. Jenny and I had a great time reminiscing about the good old days, and since neither of us had a date at the time, we decided to go on a date. Our mothers both encouraged us to stop dating, so we naturally decided to go out. 2 years have already passed since then. Time flies by so fast. Jenny and I are going to my parents' graveyard after the new year to inform them of something. We're going to tell them we're getting married.